Where did the idea come from for the book?
Interestingly, my daughter did work in a sexual assault prevention center, and a male supremacist hate group targeted them and started calling the hotline and giving very disturbing accounts of trauma in their efforts to traumatize some of the counselors. The other thing they were trying to do was to jam the phone lines for real callers. And I was so enraged. It took them literally weeks to get everything resolved and be able to help the population that they were really trying to help.
Lizzie, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to be here today.
Thanks for having me, Mark. I'm really glad to be here.
So we are here today to talk about Power Surge,
Yes.
one of your thriller novels. Let's start with, we're just going to jump right into the pitch.
All right, sounds good. So, Power Surge is a here it is, fast-paced, character-driven thriller written from four distinct points of view. Cece Crane's, her two daughters, Megan and Scotty, and Luke, a member of a male supremacist hate group called Men Roar. And Roar is an acronym for Reclaim Our Authority and Rights. So after decades of working in advertising, Cece Crane is no stranger to sexual harassment, but she refuses to stand by while more women are traumatized. So offenders are given warnings, but if their bad behavior continues, they will be punished. Mild harassers will feel the sting of public humiliation and professional ruin, but hardcore serial offenders will be stopped permanently. Her daughters Megan and Scotty deal with the effects of living in a patriarchal society in quite different ways. As a stay-at-home mom, Megan struggles to find her own identity, separate from her roles as mother and a wife. Her frustration leads her to bad choices that Cece's activities inadvertently expose. Scotty combats the unfairness of working in a sexual violence prevention center. And when Scotty becomes the target of Men Roar because of her work, Cece's mama bear ferocity kicks in, and she creates a hit list of the local members. One of Cece's victims is Jim Baxter, a brazen, unrepentant groper. When Luke looks into his father's death, his father is Jim Baxter, he discovers Cece's murderous activities, and the tables turn. Cece becomes the hunted. So despite her best efforts, nothing happens as planned, and her vigilantism exacts a devastating price.
That's great. Thank you. That's a wonderful pitch.
Yeah, you bet.
So there's a lot of layers here. Let's start with, where did the idea come from for the book?
Interestingly, my daughter did work in a sexual assault prevention center, and a male supremacist hate group targeted them and started calling the hotline and giving very disturbing accounts of trauma in their efforts to traumatize some of the counselors. The other thing they were trying to do was to jam the phone lines for real callers. And I was so enraged. It took them literally weeks to get everything resolved and be able to help the population that they were really trying to help. So I was, furious about that. And then I had spent years working in the advertising field back in the 90s when sexual harassment was almost a daily thing, truly almost a daily thing. I even had female bosses tell me, when I reported it, female bosses tell me, "Hey, suck it up, Buttercup. This is what life is." That frustration, I guess you'd call my daughter's experience the inciting incident, but that frustration also played into getting this story out there.
And was it plot that came first? Where did
Yeah, I would say Cece Crane came first. That character came first. Just knowing the frustration and the rage that she was feeling, that her daughters were still going through these kinds of things, and that her female employees were still going through these kinds of things. That kind of came into my head first. I would say the plot point of the male supremacist hate group, came that was what incited the whole thought process.
And this is not your first book, right? Is this idea number which one?
It was actually the first published book, but I have four thrillers published so far. Two more very soon to be released, hopefully. Fingers crossed.
Well,
So,
congratulations.
yeah, it wasn't actually the first book I wrote, but it was the first book I published.
Okay.
Yeah.
And why so many different characters and so many different points of view? Because you could have, I mean, I guess I could jump to conclusions based on what you've said already, but why Luke as a point of view and why the daughter?
Yeah, well, first off, I love writing in first person. I feel like it grabs your emotions more strongly when you're writing from first person. And but when you're writing from first person, of course, you can only present what that person is seeing, feeling, experiencing. So to get a well-rounded story from such with such a complex issue, I did feel like I needed more points of view. Megan has a very distinct point of view, being a stay-at-home mom, and Scotty is more the activist point of view. But Luke's important too because nobody's all bad, and even though he's the villain, the complexities of how did he get to this point? Why does he think these things about women? I think those are important issues to explore. So, I felt like to get a well-rounded story, we needed all those characters.
Okay. What was the writing process like?
That book was super easy for me. It actually, I started it during COVID. So my day job, which a lot of us authors have, my day job was put on hold because of COVID. So I was able to devote, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week to writing Power Surge, and I was able to come through and finish it in 3 months. Of course, the
Wow.
revisions took longer, but that first draft was out in 3 months. And I also think it was because of my anger at the situation with my daughter, it was a burning story. It was burning to get out. So, those two things combined made this the easiest book that I've ever written.
And what kind of research did you have to do for this book?
Yeah, I had to do a lot. So I'm a little bit technologically challenged, and there's a lot in this book about the dark web and how to find assassins. So, I had to do a lot of research on that, and it was disturbing. The other thing I had to research were male supremacist hate groups.
Yeah.
And I was stunned at how many are out there, and stunned at the just the rhetoric, the things that they actually say, believe, and the propaganda that they're putting out there. It was, a lot of days I was really disturbed by what I was finding. But that made it even more important, I felt, to tell the story. So the research was a little tough. Those were the kinds of things that I had to dive into. And at the end of the day, I kind of like, I need a shower. This is dark stuff.
Yeah.
But again, I think it's an important message to get out while providing entertainment.
Yeah. And did the research impact the story as you were? I'm assuming you didn't like do all the research up front and then write the book. There was probably some like middle ground where you're, writing the book and then going back to research. Did anything in your research change how the story was told?
Yes, definitely. Because of the mechanisms of finding things on the dark web, which I didn't know prior to writing the story, then I realized, some of the things that I was saying weren't really accurate. So I had to go back in and show how you actually, how these groups were functioning on the dark web and how Cece would have been able to find some of the things. Now, there's fiction element. Can you really find assassins on the dark web? I don't know. Probably not. But I wanted it at least to be accurate as far as how you access that. It's in the dark web, you can't just type in search for assassins. There's a whole different way, and websites are actually, the links to the websites are changing all the time. So yeah, that kind of stuff did play into the story itself, how I had to make things happen. And also even with the structure of some of the male supremacist hate groups, how they structured themselves, those kinds of things impacted how the story was told.
And when you were putting the characters together, do you have like a sort of like a recipe list, I guess you could say, of the personality, or did you just kind of see those characters come to life and then you put that life on the page?
So when I develop characters, I kind of do it like I make friends. The first 100 pages is me kind of meeting them. What do they look like? What do they wear? What are the tone of their voice? Do they have quirks in their speech pattern? Things like that. I kind of start to just meet them as you would a person on the street. And then as the pages, as I'm continuing to write some of their backstory, I'll think like, well, how did they get along with their siblings? Do they have siblings? Are they married? Do they have kids? So I create a whole file for every character, including what do they like to drink in the morning? What car do they drive? Are they messy? All those little details. I don't use them all, of course, but I feel like in order to present their side of things, I need to really know them intimately. And I would say I don't really know my characters until I'm about 100 pages in. So I often see myself going back to the beginning and rewriting some of those early chapters to actually follow what the character has become. And then once I am about 100 characters in, 100 pages in, the characters do kind of lead me as far as, well, how would Cece react to this? And then that gets me to the next chapter. Well, how would Luke react? What's his motivation? What are his fears behind his behavior? Those kinds of things. So yeah, for me, character development, that's kind of my thing. I'm known for strong character development. And I take a lot of time in creating those files with all the little details.
So is that your form of outlining is creating the character details before you start the book, and then
I
do you
don't,
pants after 100, or do you pants up to 100 pages and then you get to know the characters? How does that work?
yeah, I would say a little bit. I'll have a general idea of what the story's going to be and where it's going to end. And I'll have a general idea of the characters that I think are going to be included. But yeah, I pants it a little bit for the beginning as I'm developing those character files. Once I have them established, then I actually do create an outline, not a plot outline once I'm about 100 words in, because then I can see more where it's going. But I've even gotten to 500 pages and I'll write a line for a character, and when I go and read it back, I'm like, oh my gosh, she would never say that. Like, that is so out of her voice, and I have to cut the line. I really do try to let them speak to me. But yes, at the first start, it's kind of more of a pantser, and then I go into the outline.
And how do you balance so many characters in your mind? I know I have a trilogy with a lot of characters, the same idea, and it's very challenging. I use Scrivener, and I almost have to open up Scrivener, go through the character, look at all the things I said, and then go back to start just that writing session because I have a hard time holding on to, who is this person that I'm writing now, because they have to be so distinct in their voices. How do you balance all that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. They do have to be distinct in their voices. I like, even though I have a headline on the chapter that says which voice it is,
Mhm.
I want the reader to be able to tell who it is just by reading. I don't want them to have to rely on it. And for me, well, the file is one thing. Each little detail that I add, like if I say she's allergic to lactose, I do add that into the file so that I have that to refer back to if I forget anything. But as far as tone of voice and what they would say and their emotions and how they express them, I honestly, before I sit down to write a chapter, I kind of just sit there for a minute and I'm like, okay, you're Cece now. Let's go back into Cece's world. Let's go back into Cece's body. And I take a minute to kind of center myself in their voice before I start writing. And then when I go to the next chapter, same thing. When I go to the next voice, I take a minute to kind of just reflect on where they're coming from, what's their driving motivation, and just really center myself in their world before I try to even start writing their chapter.
And did you write this book in a linear fashion, like chapter one, and then change voice chapter two, instead of writing all of Cece's story and then writing
Yep.
all of another character?
Yep. I've tried it a couple, because most of my books have at least two points of view. Most of my books are first person. And I have tried to write uh, just one character's through the whole story, and it just doesn't work for me. I get too confused in plotting, like, well, wait a minute, what's happening next? So, yes, I definitely write it in a linear fashion, but just taking the time to center myself. Now, occasionally I might have to add in some chapters in a point of view, so then it'll be out of order, but generally linear.
Was there a time where you almost gave up on the book? I know you mentioned you wrote it very quickly, so probably not.
Yeah. This one, no, no, it was there. That story, it was just there. And once I started, like, I couldn't wait to get up in the morning and get back at the computer. So this one was super, super easy. Some of my books, sure, I think, oh boy, it's seventh rewrite, and I'm like, wow, is this ever going to be done? But this one, no.
And in your process, how do you create characters that you want to readers to stick with readers? Like, what's the thought process on how do I make this person relatable, or how do I capture readers through this personality?
I think first I try to think of somebody that I know, like a real person that I know, because then I'm able to dive a little, to have a point of reference, I guess is what I'm trying to say, a point of reference from a person that I know. But I will tell you, I have always wanted to write, but until I had experienced a lot of life and met a lot of people and had some tragedies, had some
Mhm.
successes, but also some failures and tragedies, I needed to have gone through a whole host of emotions before I was able to put those emotions on a page. So I feel like most of us, a trauma is going to be whatever causes the trauma response is still similar in humans. So I try to put myself in that place and remember something from my experience that was traumatizing or frightening or whatever. I try to put myself in that position as I'm writing, because real emotions then will come out on the page. That's also why for me writing is exhausting. When I am writing something difficult, like, I'm feeling those emotions. Sometimes I'm making the faces. Oh, if I'm sad, or my character is sad, I'm making that face. First of all, because so I can describe it, but also so I'm feeling it, So I
Yeah.
really try to embody those characters, and I think those emotions do come out on the page when I'm able to do that.
Do you ever use music or theme music? One thing I've done during some of my writing sessions is use, if their character is supposed to be in a storm, I'll have like a lightning storm in the background, so I don't forget. Yes, I need to move the plot, and I can't keep pointing at the storm, but there is very much a storm happening here. Or there's this is an action or fight scene, so I want, that I put on a music that's like very exciting, so that as I'm writing, I'm like, I get that energy. And then the same thing with being like down or a sad moment, I'll put on music that might be a violin or some calm music that will like make me almost feel sad to write that tragic scene.
I haven't tried that, but I like the idea. So I think I might. Typically for me, I kind of write in silence, but I really like that idea. Like you said, that atmospheric. Because I often, like I said, if I'm trying to describe facial features or gestures, I make them. I make the facial feature and look in the mirror, and I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, what's happening to my mouth? What's happening to my eyes? So, I mean, that would just add to it. So, nice tip. I'm going to give that a try.
I have to try the face one too. I haven't tried mimicking that. Was there a character you liked writing the most?
I'd have to say Cece. Of course, Cece has a lot. Every character I write has a little bit of me in them, but Cece has a lot of me in her. Just her experiences in the advertising field were very similar to mine. I'm not going to hire assassins, but I'm not going to say that the thought hasn't crossed my mind, in certain situations. But yeah, I think she was my favorite character in this book to write.
So I got a couple more questions for you as we're
Sure.
kind of wrapping up a little bit. The first one is for authors who are listening to the podcast. And what would be your advice to someone who has published like book one or two and is, trying to go build from there?
You mean like from a marketing standpoint or?
Either.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, they're trying to get their book out there. I mean, yeah, you could obviously write the next book. This would be one piece of advice, but whatever you want.
Yeah, well, I think for writers in general, the biggest thing that I learned is write what I want to read. Instead of me worrying about like, oh, I'm trying to write the next bestseller or what's trendy or hot right now or what are readers going to like. In fact, I was just at a critique group recently and I'm working on my next book. And the gentleman there suggested maybe I pull back a little bit on some of these hot button issues that I'm putting in this book. And my thought was, nope, I'm going to lean totally into it.
Hmm.
That's what I write. I write from my heart. I lean into difficult issues. My books are probably going to piss people off, but in some way. But I'm not trying to appeal to everybody. I'm writing what I have a passion for and the things that I want to, read. And I think that if you write from your heart, if you're writing with passion, all of that's going to be on the page. So that would be my number one thing is write for you, write from your heart, write with passion. Whatever happens after that will happen. Because marketing is tough, getting the word out there is tough. And if you don't 100% believe in what you're offering, it's even harder. So I think that's the key is just writing what you love and where your passion is coming from.
Thank you. I love that advice. You don't
Yeah.
have to write to market. It may be the
Yeah.
quickest way to sell a book, but it's not the quickest way to fill that passion and feel good about what you're doing. And a long, sustainable career is
Exactly.
often not done with just something you don't really care to write, but you're trying to sell. Yeah, thank you. That's great.
Yeah.
Last question. Where can people find you, find your books, and hear more about them?
Well, Amazon, of course. Everybody can order on Amazon. Lots of books, places, Books a Million, Barnes and Noble, that kind of thing. But also on my website, lizzieqnert.com. So I can do signed autographed copies from there. And there's, all my books are on there and you'll find out more about each one and a little bio about me. So, yep,
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule. If you don't mind
absolutely.
sticking around for a couple of minutes after the show, we have a couple of bonus questions for our newsletter subscribers that they get when they sign up for the newsletter.
Awesome. Of course.
Thank you.